In this world, they say anything. There is an old saying to suit almost every situation. However, sometimes you get into a battle between two old sayings and you have to try to figure out which one is the wisest. In my case, this was exactly the case. Old people always told me that blood is the most powerful thing. But they also told me that love will conquer all. So what happens when love meets blood? Growing up, I was part of an average Midwestern family. Of course, there were my mom and dad. Of course, they were still together and loved each other very much. There was no indication that either one had ever cheated on the other. I think they either had no imagination or they just loved each other, so what the hell, they never did. Okay, maybe that's not the right way to put it. I think it's better to say that they were each other's best friends and partners from the moment they met, and there was simply no one they wanted to be with more. Here's my parents' life story. Well, the short version anyway. Jim met Brenda. They fell in love. They got married and had 3 children, all girls. They stayed together forever and died. End. See what I mean? It's a damn fairy tale. My story is a little longer. As I mentioned, Jim and Brenda had 3 daughters, and this story is about sisters. The bond between sisters can be very strong, but it can also be very tumultuous. In my case, the relationship between my sister and I was damaged from the very beginning. I certainly can't take responsibility for how this shit turned out. It was Jim and Brenda who ruined everything. It's the same everywhere, everywhere. I'm going to introduce you to the facts of people's lives. The fact is that life hates fairy tales, so whenever a fairy tale happens, like in our case Jim and Brenda, they act like black holes in the universe. Things may be perfect for 2 star-crossed lovers, but everything around them goes wrong when he gets pulled into their orbit. Jim and Brenda's 3 daughters, that is, my sisters and I, did not inherit the fairy tale. The 3 of us are as different as can be. Each of us has our own problems of varying severity. My sister Melinda is the oldest of us. She is, of course, Jim and Brenda's pride and joy. She, as the firstborn, is ideal in the eyes of her parents. Mindy, as she is known, can do no wrong. Her parents shower her with all the praise they can, and she is instantly forgiven for any mistakes she makes. My sister Belinda is a baby, of course. Lindy, as she is affectionately called, is spoiled because she is the youngest and last child they will ever have. She is a bundle of joy and love, no matter how flawed she may be. This brings us to me. I'm Cynthia, aka Cindy, and like the middle child, I don't exist. I was constantly forgotten by my parents and other family members. My triumphs were ignored or downplayed. My mistakes were exaggerated or used as an example of my sister's superiority. I was constantly called the other. Throughout her life, Mindy struggled with weight problems. Okay, I'm sugarcoating this. Mindy is fat. Honestly, my parents are to blame for this. They loved her too much. Every time Mindy opened her cute little mouth, they filled it with cake. By the time we reached our teens, Mindy weighed more than the average adult woman. By the time we were adults, Mindy weighed more than the average adult male athlete, who was a foot taller than her. Lindy noticed at an early age all the attention and special treatment that Mindy received, so she took a different path. She struggled with a variety of problems, from anorexia and bulimia to all sorts of drugs. Since I was fine, I was forgotten again. Whatever happened to Mindy affected everyone in the house. Honestly, I don't think my parents had a plan for raising their children. They just made decisions as they came, based on what happened to Mindy, and that became the rule. When Mindy turned 18, she had never been on a date. Seriously, what high school student wants to date a girl who weighs almost 300 pounds? So my dad paid one of the interns at his job to take Mindy to prom. If Mindy was okay with it, it became a rule. As a result, I wasn't allowed to date until I was 18 either. I was invited from the age of 15, but was not allowed. Of course, Lindy didn't date either. She would just disappear for days on end on drug binges, but never actually date. Don't get me wrong, I love my sisters. I would do anything for any of them, and often give up everything for their happiness. But this story is mostly about me and Mindy, and the one time I not only wouldn't give up something to make her happy, I actually took what she had. The three of us have always had a strong family resemblance. Our parents were attractive people, and I think on paper the three of us should be too. We all have the same sparkling blue eyes. We all have the same blonde hair. But of course, that's where the similarities end. Mindy, of course, is big. She doesn't look like a giant fat blob. She still has an hourglass figure, it's just that the hourglass is about to explode, and you can't tell the time because it's all completely filled with sand. Lindy, even when she turned 18, had the body of a 14-year-old boy. The doctors told us that if she came off the drugs and changed her lifestyle, she might be able to gain back some of the weight and development she had lost, but that did not happen. Shortly after her 18th birthday, Lindy fried her brains with some exotic cocktail and had to be institutionalized. I have a problem with being beautiful. I let my hair grow long and straight like our mothers. I am 5 feet 6 inches tall and weigh 118 pounds. I have beautiful breasts, a beautiful butt, and a very toned tummy. I was a cheerleader and homecoming queen. Of course, none of this mattered to my parents. I, like my sister Mindy, had my first date at prom. His name was Carlton Whitfield, and he was the quarterback of our football team. Throughout the school year, he and I exchanged smoldering glances back and forth, just waiting for the chance to be together. Of course, our first date was great for me. After that, my whole life went downhill. Let's face it, this was my first date. I knew everything about sex and kissing and felt those teenage hormones. I just didn't have the experience. Besides, nice girls like me just don't hang out, especially on the first damn date. I was confident that Carlton would be the right fit for me. I imagined him to be just like our parents a generation before us. Carlton brought me home right after graduation. After that, he asked me to go to a party with him, but I refused. I imagined something completely different. I saw the two of us sitting on the porch swing, and after some small talk, I was ready for my first kiss. This is not exactly how it happened. I remember leaving Carlton on the porch and going inside the house to get us a glass of lemonade. Our parents were not at home, so I felt calm. I couldn't be gone for more than 5 minutes, but when I returned, my heart was broken. I still remember standing in the doorway in my ball gown with 2 glasses of lemonade, watching my fat-assed sister make out with my beau and tell him lies about me. They kissed, and she let him put his tongue in her mouth. See what you have to lose by dating my dumb little sister, Mindy purred. What does she have that I don't? What do you like so much about her? She's very nice, Carlton replied nervously. So I'm not cute? Mindy hissed. I'm the one who lets you kiss her, not her. And she's very pretty, and she's got a great figure, Carlton added, becoming even more nervous. He tried to protect me in his own way. What's so special about her figure? Mindy asked, standing up. She has nice breasts, Carlton said. They look very. She's nothing special, Mindy hissed. She pulled the bottom of her shirt out of her skirt and showed him her huge breasts in her bra. These are much bigger, aren't they? Carlton's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He nodded so quickly that I thought his neck was going to come off. Mindy then sat on his lap and started rubbing herself against him on our porch swing. Do you want to go further? She asked. He nodded. His eyes were glued to her large breasts, covered with a bra. You don't have to tell anyone about this, Mindy said. He nodded again. When my little sister gets back, tell her you need to go home. Then wait for me in our backyard, Mindy said. He agreed, and I cried right there. I wiped my tears and stepped onto the veranda. Here I stand, still in my ball gown, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. Mindy smiled at me and asked how my prom went. She nodded her head when I answered her, although I still don't remember a word of what I said. Carlton suddenly stood up. Cindy, I felt good, he said, but I have to go. Something happened. He grabbed one of the glasses of lemonade and drank it in one gulp. I'll make it up to you, he said, and turned to leave. Tears streamed down my cheeks. It was hard for me to believe that he would actually do this. I thought Mindy just scared him. This was my first lesson about the many strange things in life. I went up to my room and changed into a nightgown. I heard Carlton sneaking into our backyard, and my broken heart completely shattered into pieces. I also heard Mindy's heavy footsteps as she tried to sneak down the back stairs. Lindy wasn't home as usual, so I wasn't worried about her seeing it. I walked over to Mindy's room, which overlooked the back of the house. Her room was dark, and I looked out the window. Mindy took one of our lounge chairs from the deck and placed it on the grass where it wouldn't be visible. She sat on him. Then she got up and turned off the light on the terrace, but I could still see her in the moonlight. It was surreal. The houses in the neighborhood were dark, so it seemed like only the three of us were outside. Carlton came out of the bushes and Mindy not only lifted her shirt, but took it off completely. Then she dropped her bra to the ground and pulled her skirt down, squirming to free herself from it. Carlton ran up to her instantly. He started kissing her and squeezing her huge breasts. I think I've always had a very feminine and romantic idea of sex. I always thought it would be beautiful and magical. What Carlton and Mindy had done was cruel and disgusting, but I couldn't look away. Carlton had violent sex with Mindy. There was no tenderness, no kisses. They just indulged in primitive instincts driven by their hormones. Carlton didn't like my sister at all. It was a 19-year-old boy. He was at the mercy of his hormones. Mindy was not Carlton's woman. She was just a sex object. He got what he wanted, and now he wanted nothing to do with her. "I'll keep my promise," he said, standing up and starting to get dressed. "Nobody will know about this. Be sure to find out, too." I got the idea that Carlton was more concerned about protecting his reputation than my sister's. This reminds me of another old saying. Fat girls are like mopeds. They're a lot of fun to ride, but you don't want your friends to see you riding one of them. I went back to my room and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, my parents returned, and neither of them even bothered to ask about my graduation. 2 days later, Carlton called and asked me to go to the movies with him. I categorically refused him. "Did I do something to upset you?" he asked. "Cindy, you're beautiful," he said. "I want you to be my girlfriend." I hung up on him. "Asshole," I spat. "I thought you liked him," Mindy said. "You went to prom with him. I could kind of see you too, maybe even getting married, or at least dating for a long time." "Why, so you can sleep with him after all my dates," I hissed. "Cindy, I only did this for you," she whined. "You are somehow naive about guys. He just wasn't right for you. He was looking for only one thing." "Yeah, he wanted a fat bitch that would let anyone fuck her," I said. "And he found one." This started the relationship between my sister and me. That summer, I began my search for true love. I wanted what my parents had. My sister, on the other hand, couldn't date herself, so she wanted what I wanted, and she often succeeded. Many times it got to the point where my partners would just meet me at a place instead of bringing them home. At the end of the summer, I left for college. Over the years, I continued to date and explore my sexuality. I still haven't calmed down. Not because I didn't have any offers, but because I just couldn't find what I wanted. I needed a man who would make my heart flutter. I needed a man who would love me as much as I loved him. I needed a guy who would be faithful to me no matter what. I've had too many boyfriends who claimed to love me and would do anything for me, and who were too easily tempted. My relationship with my sister was, of course, never the same. My parents, as usual, blamed me. "You have to understand it from her side," my father said. "Our society does not look at the person inside. They only look at the body and face. You were given a gift. Your sister isn't so lucky. Sometimes she has to do things that you don't do. Doesn't she have the right to find someone too?" "Dad, she has no right to try to steal my boys," I said. That's all I've ever said on this subject. I knew I was preaching to the choir. Nothing I said against Mindy will ever be remembered. The only thing I could do was further make my parents think that Mindy needed love and attention, and that I was just cold and unfeeling. Mindy dropped out of college her freshman year. She ended up working in the library in our city. After 4 years of college, I returned home to make my fortune and got a good job at an engineering firm in the city. Mindy was a full-time librarian. She could never become a senior librarian or even a manager because she didn't have a college degree, but at least she worked enough to partially support herself. After I moved into my own beautiful apartment, things got even worse. After a month of living alone, Mindy had the bright idea that the two of us should move in together. Independent sisters, that's what she called it. My mom and dad were all for it and started talking about the benefits of the idea that very evening. The train derailed when I said in a very quiet voice, "No." Everyone turned around and looked at me like I'd shit myself in the gravy at Thanksgiving dinner. "It's time to be alone," I said, "and I'm fine. I pay all my bills and manage to save some money. I can probably take a few nice vacations every year and see some things. This is something I need to experience." It was my politically correct way of saying I didn't want to live with Mindy. Of course, when Mindy's face fell and she began to cry, I was attacked. "That's so selfish of you," my mother said. "Just because you got such a cool job doesn't mean you have to turn your back on your family," my father said. "Don't forget that you owe us, Missy. Who paid you to go to college?" "Dad," I said calmly. "I received a partial scholarship because of cheerleading and academics. This covered most of my tuition and expenses. I got a student loan for everything else. So the federal government paid for me to go to school, and they confused me with Mindy. You paid for her first year of school, even though she didn't attend classes regularly." "See, that's what I'm talking about," he snapped. "You and your smart mouth. You know very well that your sister is very smart. She just didn't do well in a traditional academic environment. Students in all of these classes, both high school and college, are alienated and have turned the classroom into a hostile learning situation. Mindy stopped attending classes to protest society's discrimination against overweight Americans." "How exactly did they do this?" I asked. "In most of my classes, people who were overweight were simply not asked out. Or maybe they were talked about a little. We talked about everyone, Dad. White kids talked about black kids and vice versa. Smart children talked about stupid children and vice versa. They picked on me too, Dad. Every time I walked into class, guys would stare at my ass or breasts, and bullies would even tell me what they wanted to do to me. It's part of growing up. You need to develop a stronger shell and let everything that doesn't matter just slide away. Children who wear glasses are called four-eyed. It's not wonderful, it's just life." "Well, Mindy's artistic soul couldn't handle it," he said. "Yes, Mindy is an artist," I muttered. "I just couldn't let my fat bitch sister move in with me and sleep with every guy I dated. Since I no longer lived at home, my word on the matter was final, I thought." 2 days later, my mother was at my house. She actually asked me why my computer and office were in Mindy's room. She showed it to my father when he picked her up. He looked at me and said that since Mindy would probably be moving in with us over the weekend, he would help me move the computer desk and office furniture into my room and put the rest into storage. I needed to break the computer by Friday so we could move the furniture because he didn't know how to handle computers. I just laughed in his face. He looked at me, then at Mom. "Our generation is not as tech-savvy as yours," he said, "so you can sue me." I went and started rummaging through my papers. "Dad, look at this," I said. He looked at the document I handed him. "It looks like a lease," he said. "Exactly," I confirmed. He smiled that he had guessed right. "Whose name is on it?" I asked. "Yours," he replied. "Do you see anyone else's name here?" I asked. "No," he said. "Are you going to add Mindy's name?" "No," I answered sharply. "What's the matter, Cynthia?" he asked. "Dad, when I lived at home, I obeyed your rules," I said. "I live on my own now. This is not your home, Dad. You can't make decisions here. I'm sorry, but Mindy won't be moving in with me." He looked at me for a long time and then looked back at my mother. "Come on, Brenda," he said. "We'll have to break the news to Mindy carefully. Maybe we should take her out for pizza. It won't be easy. She was really counting on it." He looked at me again. "Cindy, why did you lead that poor girl by the nose? You know how much she's been through over the years, and now you slip her a prize and take it away at the last minute. That's not the way to treat a sister. She would never do this to you like this. Tim. I remember the first time I saw Mindy. I work as an engineer in industry, but at that moment I was doing research for one of my projects. I have always had an interest in traditional metallurgy, which seems strange to many. I guess it looks like I'm bringing my work home. It may be strange that after a day of working on the processes of making auto parts out of steel, I come home and want to learn how to make other things out of the same material. But that's me. The two disciplines are completely different, of course. At work, we have all the latest and greatest computerized devices for monitoring and processing. We can move from design to production without leaving the office. I can create 10 prototypes of something I designed in minutes. They can then be tested, verified, and proven to work the same day. When I do this at home, a single blade can take weeks to complete, and one mistake in the forging process can mean I have to start all over again. But let's get back to what I wanted to say. I was looking for information about the process that the Vikings used to make their swords, but unfortunately I had no success on the internet. I found information on everything Viking related, including thousands of pages dedicated to Viking adult film, but nothing on my topic. So I had to do it the old-fashioned way. I had to go to the library. The first thing I saw when I walked up to the counter to ask for directions to the books I needed was Mindy smiling. She was a big woman, very big, but she looked pretty good. She had really beautiful curly blonde hair that was cut short and pulled back from her face. It gave her a more youthful appearance and highlighted her eyes. I was also fascinated by her huge bulges on her chest. She directed me to the section of the library where I could find the materials I needed. I didn't pay much attention to it because I didn't have much time, but it left an impression on me. In fact, time was one of the things that worked against me. Finishing work every day at 5 o'clock, I only had a couple of hours left since the library closed at 7. Over the next few days, this became a routine. I would leave the office and rush to the library, where I had less than 90 minutes to study. In just 2 days, we started calling each other by our first names. On the third day, she already brought me coffee. I thought I was going to lose my library privileges on Thursday when she caught me staring at her butt while she was leaving. I felt bad all that evening. This was a typical male reaction. Mindy had a huge ass, and that day she was wearing jeans so tight that it looked like it was impossible to get them on her. She brought me coffee, which actually violated library rules, and I repaid her by ogling her ass like a frat boy. When she came over later to say the library was closing in 20 minutes, I tried to apologize. "Mindy, I'm so sorry about what happened earlier," I said nervously. "It was disrespectful and very inappropriate." "Well, at least you apologized," she said. "Most of you guys just point and laugh. Some of them make circus jokes. Like, 'Look at the elephant.' I've probably heard all the fat jokes." "Mindy, you have completely the wrong idea about why I was looking at you," I said. "So why were you looking at my big fat ass then?" she asked. Even as she asked this question, she bent over, and it seemed as if her huge breasts were about to fall out of her shirt. I got very nervous and seemed to be sweating. I muttered. "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "You liked it, didn't you?" "I have to go," I said. I quickly stood up, collected my things, and left without saying another word. Of course, I didn't go to the library either on Friday or Saturday. Saturday would be the day I could get a lot done since I didn't have to work. But my embarrassment kept me away. I also didn't show up on Monday and Tuesday of the following week. But on Wednesday, I finally returned. I didn't go to the counter. I entered through the back entrance and even sat at another table. I stayed in the reference section and did not go to the front counter. About 40 minutes into my visit, my luck ran out. Mindy was showing the book section to 2 high school students when she saw me out of the corner of her eye. She pointed to the shelf and, out of spite, walked straight towards my desk. "So, Tim," she said with a smile, "how are you?" "It's okay, I think," I said. "Where have you been?" she asked. "I thought you wouldn't want me here," I said. "Tim, honey, what I want doesn't matter. The sign outside says public library. I don't own it, I just work here, she said. Secondly, I love having you here. It was all just a misunderstanding. I was teasing you. She sat down at the table and pulled my head closer to hers. Tim, I liked that you were looking at my ass. It made me feel really good. She pointed to two high school students at a table across the hall. You think I wouldn't like a break from idiots like these two sometimes? She jutted out her lower jaw and began to speak in an annoying voice. Dayuyu, look, a fat cow. Dayuyu, she's fat. Dayuyu, he. I had to laugh at her parody. So then I meet a cute guy who looks at me with real interest. I caught you staring at my ass. I got too excited, Tim. I didn't mean to scare you off. I was trying to attract you. So, don't disappear anymore. I smiled as she stood up and went back to work. A few days later, I finished my research. I went to the library anyway. Tim, why don't you have any books? Asked Mindy. I think I'm done with my research, I said. Her face fell. Then why are you here? She asked sadly. I'm kind of used to seeing you, I said. It wouldn't have been a better day if I didn't get a dose of Mindy before I went home. Her smile lit up the room. Then she looked at me and started whispering again. You know, you could always just ask me out, she said. I'm pretty sure I'll say yes. Mindy, could you? I started. Yes, she shouted before I could finish the question. Every head in the library turned to us. SHHH, she said, pointing her finger at me as if I was the one screaming. That Friday night, I picked Mindy up at her apartment, and we went out to dinner and a movie. I had a great time and hoped she did too. I didn't have the best dating history, so I asked questions and questions. I tried to be the perfect gentleman, but I got the impression that Mindy was expecting something different. There was a delicious tension between us as we looked at each other across the table during dinner. We had a nice chat, and I learned more about her. I even convinced her to talk a little about her family. She didn't seem to want to talk about them. Mindy, I'm so sorry, I told her. I think I'm asking you questions because I really want to get to know you better. Much about us depends on our interactions with close family members. Your personality, likes and dislikes are influenced by the things that happened to you while you were growing up. And maybe I'm moving too fast, but I hoped that someday I would meet them. She looked at me as if I had stuck a cattle prod in her ass. What do you mean? She asked in utter shock. Sorry, I said again. I was sure that I had misjudged the situation between us. I guess I should have expected that. What the hell are you talking about, Tim? She asked sharply. What do you mean? Tell me exactly what you meant by meeting my family. It's not a big deal, I said. We just have different ideas about where things are going and... Where do you think he's going, Tim? She asked. Look, Mindy, you don't have to be upset, I said. I can take you home. Now I see that you simply accepted my invitation out of politeness. Tim, shut up and answer my damn question, she snapped. Where do you think we're going? Mindy, you're so sweet and... I started, but paused. I guess I was hoping that we were getting closer to a relationship-like situation and... You and me, she said smiling. In a relationship? Do we like it together? She laughed. Okay, maybe that was a little stupid, I said. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Tim, it wasn't stupid at all, she said. This is the best idea I've ever heard of. But you don't know anything about me yet, I said. My house is a mess, I snore and... I know how to clean, she said. And I love to snore. I'd love to hear yours. This is a sign of people who feel comfortable with each other and can be themselves. Nobody's perfect, Tim. At the thought of this, all the blood rushed from one of my heads to the other, and I squeezed her hand tighter. She smiled and looked into my eyes, although I couldn't figure out what the hell she was looking for. Tim, when I run around like this, I don't wear a bra either, she said, smiling. I imagined her large breasts moving under her t-shirt, and my pants became even tighter. Mindy, Tim is the man of my dreams. From the moment he first walked into my library, I knew he was special. He's very shy around women, but he's a great guy. He looks very good and is very well built. Most of the time, guys like him don't even look twice at me. I'm 28 years old, and I've never had a regular boyfriend. There are many men in my life, but they are all borrowed. I think, essentially, to be honest, I'm a girl of easy virtue. I'm that fat girl that all the men have sex with, but none of them want to date. Yes, I am that call girl, in my case, that big booty call girl who does what their wives and girlfriends don't. I think I've gotten used to the way things have been over the years. I never had a single fucking date in high school. My dad's younger friend was invited to one of our family barbecues. He spent the entire day looking at my little sister. Just before he had to leave, he came up and asked me to take me to my graduation. I was in seventh heaven. I also felt great about taking something away from my bitch little sister. I actually had two younger sisters, but I only hated one. Lindy was the youngest. She was fine. She didn't bother me much. Most of the time she was alone and tried to hide from everyone. She never tried to compete with me for the most important commodity, the attention of our parents. Lindy also looked like a walking skeleton. It was simply hard to look at her. But Cindy, oh no, I hated this bitch from the first breath. She was supposed to be my little sister. The sisters were supposed to look the same, act the same, talk the same, and, in essence, be the same. This bitch has obviously never seen the Patty Duke show. This bitch was supposed to be a mini-me, but she couldn't even do that right. Cindy ruined everything. First of all, she was thin, and I think she did it just to spite me. The fact that she was thin or well-built automatically made me fat. Then, when she went to school, she became pretty. No matter what our parents thought, all the boys at school loved Cindy. They barely even noticed me, and when they noticed, it was always fat jokes. To top it all off, Cindy had the nerve to be smart. I think she worked her ass at school, doing homework, studying, and all that stuff, just to make people think she was smarter than me. Anyone with a brain should have realized that since we are from the same family, we must be equally smart. I think she was just pretending to be smart to make me look bad. Thank God my father pointed out that the reason Cindy was getting better grades than me was because I was in a higher class, so the work was harder. I don't understand why people shook their heads when he said that because it sounded completely logical to me. I simply made it my life's goal to take away from Cindy everything she had and everything she liked. I also did my best to get her into trouble whenever possible. I hated Cindy with a passion. My first date was also not the magical event I expected. We got to the hall, and he quickly sat me down in a chair against the back wall and started dancing and talking to other girls. Halfway through the dance, I overheard two other girls gossiping about how my father paid him to take me to prom. We left much earlier than I expected, and he looked very unhappy in the car. He constantly muttered something and got even angrier. "Why are you so upset?" I asked. "Doesn't my father pay you enough?" "It's not you, darling," he said, smiling at me. "That's the bitch I was dancing with. She kept me going all night and then just left me. I hate bitches like that. The least she could do was please me." "I would do it for you," I said, "if only I knew what it was, or how to make it." He turned the car so fast that he left rubber tracks on the road. The next thing I knew, we were parked in a darkened part of the park. He spoke to me in a very pleasant voice. His whole attitude towards me changed. He hugged me, and it made me feel special. It was different from how my mother and father felt when they hugged me. It was just weird. Not bad, but strange. He pulled my dress off my shoulders, and I didn't resist. Then I gave him pleasure. Little did I know that several of my classmates walked past our car and saw what was happening inside. Several boys in my class made it a point to randomly run into me this summer. I learned a lot about men that summer. I found out that men who were already engaged or seeing other girls would come and spend time with me. But they only did this in places or in cases where no one we knew would ever know about it. If I saw them or waved at them when their friends were nearby, they would pretend not to notice me or even laugh at me. But as soon as they left their friends, they called me. When we were alone, they did everything I asked them to do, as long as it ended up between my legs. By the time I left for college, I already knew the game. College, of course, was a disaster. I have never been a disciplined student. I have never been the kind of person who studied or completed assignments without being forced. So as soon as I got out on my own and was in an environment where no one was forcing me to do anything, I just went crazy. I was lucky if I came to class once a week. Essentially, I majored in the wrong subjects that I studied. I pretty much specialized in sex. Plus, I'd never had a boyfriend before. This went on for some time. The guys came to me. I didn't have to go after them. I had a few girlfriends, but most of them constantly whined about how they either needed to find a man or how badly men treated them. I didn't have any of these problems. I was queen after dark. The situation changed 2 years later. It's not that I stopped being queen after dark, but that I was stalking the guy. This little bitch who called herself my sister was finally allowed to date. I was home over the weekend and heard her and some of her little cheerleader friends bragging about who they were going to prom with. I almost pissed a cinder block when I heard Cindy talk about how many guys wanted to ask her to prom. She settled on some brat named Carlton or something like that. I flipped through her yearbook and took a look at it. He was so damn good to her. She didn't deserve it. I was angry. My dad had to pay a guy to take me to prom, but guys were lined up to take Cindy to her prom. Life was so unfair. It was even worse when he took her. He rented a limousine and the whole 9 yards. I was furious. When they arrived home, I watched them talk awkwardly on the porch. Cindy had no idea what men wanted or needed. I smiled and decided to teach this little bitch a lesson. She offered to go and make them lemonade. I laughed until I dropped when she entered the house. I went out onto the porch and started talking to Carlton. Then I just kissed him. He talked about how beautiful Cindy was and what a beautiful body she had. He immediately fell silent when I lifted my shirt and showed him my bra-covered breasts. It was child's play to convince him to come back and sneak into our yard after getting rid of Cindy. That night, I fucked the hell out of this guy and enjoyed it even though he wasn't very good or very experienced. I just let him do whatever he wanted to me. The real thrill for me was taking the boy away from Cindy. In my opinion, this proved my superiority over her. Everything she had, I could take from her without even trying. And all summer, until she left for school, I took into bed any guy she brought home. I think the biggest difference between us was that Cindy was really looking for love. I just wanted to have fun and get men away from her. After a while, she realized what was going on and never brought her dates home again. Cindy went off to college and, as usual, was popular and successful. I ended up working in the library for minimum wage. I call it my library because by the time Cindy graduated, I was already running the place. Sure, there was a college-educated head librarian in charge of the facility, but the assistant librarians, including me, did all the damn work. Our boss Heidi had no idea how the library actually worked. She was making 3 times my salary and had no idea. When questions about procedures or certain problems were discussed at conferences with other libraries in the region, Heidi simply told the truth. Mindy does it. When problems with copiers, delivery, or anything like that were discussed, Heidi would simply smile and say that we don't have such problems. What Heidi didn't know was that the solution to all these problems lay between my legs. If a copier broke down, the company didn't like to send technicians to fix it because they had to bill the city to get paid. Sometimes they weren't paid until the end of the month or the end of the quarter. Most libraries faced the same problem. But the technician in our area loved coming to our library because every time he came, he got paid extra. He received pleasure or sex in exchange for his services. Heidi, despite her diploma, could not understand this. Although she studied and passed a course in psychology, she did not understand how real people behave. If she called the company to schedule a technician visit, she was often told it would be a week or 2 before someone could show up. If I called, they arrived on the same day, sometimes within a few hours. She attributed this to my pleasant voice and good communication on the phone. As I already said, she did not understand anything. Over the years, I've gotten used to the fact that I can have any man I want in secret, but I'll probably never be able to have a long-term relationship. I was realistic. I realized that there are two types of men in the world. The first type are those who want to sleep with me, but will never be seen with me in public. And the second one is the bad guys. The bad guys are the ones who weren't honest with me. They pretended that they wanted to be with me. Maybe they even took me out on dates a couple of times to places their friends didn't go. But as soon as they achieved their goal, all meetings ended. I didn't care because my schedule was always full. I kept turning guys down, saying I was busy, and my phone never stopped ringing. Valentine's Day and Valentine's Day have been crazy. I received so many roses and chocolates that sometimes I had to throw the chocolates away or give them to my skinnier friends who received nothing. But there is one important note. I got used to my life and came to terms with it, but I was still human. Deep inside, like every other woman, I dreamed of fantasy. I wanted to meet Prince Charming, fall in love with him, and live happily ever after. I just didn't think it would happen to me, so I tried to do everything I could to take advantage of what I had. In fact, I've already been badly burned several times. As I mentioned, there were a few guys who really made me believe that they saw more in me than just sex. And every time I realized that I was wrong, it hurt. I got to the point where even when I found a guy, I didn't stop dating others. So when I got dumped, I was too busy to pay attention. So when I first met Tim, I was skeptical. He seemed too good to be true. But to be honest, I fell in love with it from the first day it entered my library. It took every effort not to drag him into the basement that first evening. With each visit, I fell more and more in love with him. I liked everything about it. I even liked his car. Tim drove a shiny black Mustang GT in the beginning. He got depressed in the winter when he had to park that car and switch to his Jeep for the snowy months. I've never had a car, so I didn't understand the difference. I barely earned enough to afford to live on my own, and my parents often helped me with expenses. One way or another, our relationship began to develop rapidly in the first week of his research in the library. Every time he came in, my heart skipped a beat. I started counting the hours until he arrived. I had no idea what he thought about me because he was so shy and polite. From the first day he arrived, I did everything I could to show him that I liked him. I really thought he was either gay or didn't like fat girls. I also assumed that maybe he was already in a relationship and not the type to cheat. I haven't met many guys who wouldn't take what I was offering if they thought they could get away with it, but with my luck, Tim might have been the first. I almost lost hope when that Thursday happened. I brought him a cup of coffee and asked if he needed help finding materials. He looked up at me and smiled, and my heart melted again, as always. God, this man was like an addiction. Anyway, as I walked away, still watching him out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him staring at my ass, and the expression on his face was not one of disgust. Our eyes met, and he knew he was caught. Tim looked at my big ass with obvious admiration. My fantasies began to accelerate. When I later went up to tell him we were closing soon, I knew the game was on. I was ready to cancel the visit of the person I was expecting that evening so I could spend time with Tim. To my surprise, things turned out differently. He apologized for watching, but I didn't let him get off easy. I even tried to hint to him that maybe he liked my ass. I wanted him to confess so I could then tell him that if he wanted it or any other part of my body, all he had to do was say so. To my surprise, he practically ran out of the library. That night, a guy whose name I don't even remember came to my apartment and was very helpful. I imagined it was Tim. I think I even called him Tim a few times, but he didn't care. Tim did not appear in the library for almost a week. What he didn't know was that I had already punched his home address and phone number from his reader card. I decided to give him 2 weeks before I started casually meeting him in his area. I was moody and depressed the entire time he was gone. But everything turned out much better than I had hoped. Our first date was the best night of my life. Tim asked me all sorts of questions. He asked about my interests and my family. I'm just not used to this kind of attention. I think I put up a shield and almost ruined everything because no one ever cared about what I liked, and I was basically ashamed of my family. I think I thought Tim was up to something. When he talked about wanting to spend time with me and even mentioned the word relationship, my head almost exploded. At first, I thought he was really desperate for me. He wanted me so much that he pretended it all meant so much more than it seemed. Over the years, I have become quite good at detecting lies. I could instantly tell if a guy was just inviting me to a place his friends never go so he could say he took me out on a date. I also knew instantly if a guy showed up at my house, ostensibly for a date, but actually had no intention of going further than my bedroom. When I looked into Tim's eyes, I realized that he was serious. I couldn't believe that I actually liked such a cute guy. He proved this even more after we left the restaurant. I expected him to say that he was a little tired and maybe we could watch the movie another time. I thought he would take me home and then we would go to my bedroom where I could thank him for dinner. I was still in seventh heaven after dinner. He took me to one of the best restaurants in the city. He made reservations in advance and dressed up for the occasion. This was the first time in my life. He pulled out a chair for me and let me choose everything I wanted to eat. He treated me as if he was truly telling the truth about his feelings. When he opened the door and helped me into his low car, he smiled. He even fastened my seat belt without trying to touch me. I loved that Mustang. It was much cooler than my mom or dad's cars. People turned around as he drove down the street. I expected him to refuse to go to the cinema, but he never tried. I noticed that the parking lot was full when we arrived at the movie theater. People took notice of us when they heard the loud roar of the Mustang announcing our arrival. Tim waved to a few people as he got out of the car. My door was locked and I couldn't get out. I started to think that he didn't want anyone to see me getting out of the car with him. But he quickly walked around the car and opened the door, taking my hand to help me out of the low seat. He continued to hold my hand as we approached the checkout counter. "Mindy, what do you want to watch?" he asked. I was shocked. A movie," I muttered. He pulled me aside so other people could buy tickets. He pointed to a huge board with the names of all available films and showtimes. He went through the list and explained to me what each movie was about until I chose the one I liked. All this time, he did not let go of my hand. He had to let go of her to get his wallet and pay for the tickets, and then he looked at me again with the same shy expression. I thought something was wrong here. I saw several people looking at us with different expressions. Some found it funny. A few people were just curious. There were other large women smiling at us, and even a few men I knew looked upset. They were probably afraid that if I showed that I knew them, their companions would figure out what was going on. "Mindy," Tim said, still looking at me shyly. He extended his hand, and my heart melted. I was so used to guys thinking I should give them everything they wanted just because they showed any interest in a fat girl, that the way he treated me like I was the one something special about him took me by surprise. He told me to dress nicely for the evening, and I was unhappy with my choice. I put on a long black pencil skirt that I bought especially for the date. The skirt was slimming and reached mid-calf. I also wore a very nice black sweater. The sweater was not low-cut at all. I guess I never thought that we would go to the cinema. Now I realized that he would have problems touching me during the movie. If I was worried, it was in vain. Everything went perfect. He held my hand, but was a real gentleman. I assumed he was expecting a reward later. After the movie, he drove me home and helped me out of the car again. When I opened the door to my apartment, he was just standing there. He didn't even try to go inside. He smiled at me again, and then it happened. He kissed me. I'm not used to kissing. The men I dealt with weren't looking for love, they just wanted to get laid. Tim put everything he had into that kiss. It probably only lasted a couple of seconds, but it seemed endless. From the moment he kissed me, my life changed, or should have changed. They say opportunity only knocks once. This is another one of those old sayings we talked about. When Tim smiled and walked away, I saw it. I saw everything that was missing in the men in my life. I saw love in his eyes. I grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and pulled him in for another kiss. This time it was my turn. I pressed my whole body against him and felt his arousal through my skirt. At that moment, I lost control of the situation. I became as desperate and stupid as all my friends. At that moment, I understood why they stay with men who treat them badly. There was nothing I wouldn't do for Tim. Throughout my life, I have become accustomed to being simply owned. There were even times when I became very horny and just needed someone to have sex with me. But this was the first time in my life when I wanted this. He just smiled shyly at me as if he didn't know what to say. "Mindy, do you think we could go on another date if you're not too busy?" he asked. I grabbed his hand and put it on my chest. I really wanted him to feel my breasts. "Tim, can you feel how hard my heart is beating?" I asked. "I'll always have time for you. I'm available anytime you want for anything, okay?" He simply smiled and nodded. The next day at work, I was useless. I kept dreaming about the date I had the night before. When 6 o'clock arrived and Tim was not in the library, my mood soured. For the next hour before closing, I was an absolute bitch. I even had visitors turn in books early until I looked up and saw Tim's smiling face. "Why are you so late?" I asked. "You know we close in 5 minutes. I can let you take a quick look at a couple of books after." He raised his hand to interrupt me. "Mindy, I don't need the library anymore," he said. I was shocked, but I don't know why, because he told me the same thing just a few days ago. Then I realized that I had been tricked. He simply asked me out the night before to thank me for my help with his research. "So why are you here then?" I asked in an even tone. "Because it's cold outside," he said. "I don't understand," I asked. "You said you didn't have a car," he said. "Your apartment is almost a mile from here. I don't know how you get home, but I didn't want you to walk home in the dark in the cold." Thus began one of the most frustrating periods of my life. We dated, and he showed up every night to take me home. I had to give up working on Saturdays because he found out about all my interests and started organizing short trips on Saturdays. He met my parents. They adored him. My mother took me aside and told me not to let him go. "This is the type of man you change your religion for, Melinda," she said. I was madly in love with Tim. The disappointment came from not having sex. The disappointment was also accompanied by a feeling of guilt because I was just waiting for something to go wrong, and I would be devastated. So, as a defense mechanism, I continued to sleep with other guys. Moreover, I did it more often than ever before. Every night Tim would pick me up and we would drive home. We either went to his beautiful house, where I dreamed of someday living with him, or to our home. Tim was a very old-fashioned guy. He was always afraid that things were going too fast. That's why we still haven't had sex. The best thing that ever happened to me was a damn snowstorm. Since childhood and throughout my adult life, I have hated snow. But that Friday, when Tim picked me up and took me home, that day became my favorite memory. Sometimes we went out, sometimes we stayed at home. That particular Friday, we decided to stay home. I rented a movie that we were going to watch together, and we bought pizza on the way to my house. The film I took turned out to be stupid. It was a zombie movie called Slaves. Set in the future, it was about a couple where the woman cheated on her husband while living in a place full of zombies. I didn't want this kind of film. I wanted a horror movie so I could hold Tim's hand and pretend I was scared while I rubbed myself against him. This damn movie made me realize that I could lose him if I got caught cheating with other guys. I was so afraid of this that I almost cried. We heard sirens outside, and one of my neighbors knocked on the door to tell us that the police were asking people to stay outside until the morning due to the amount of snow that had fallen. "Wow, I better go," Tim said. "Tim, you can't leave," I said. "I have a Jeep," he said. "I can drive through anything." "Tim, honey," I said, "it's time." I stood in front of the door. "Can you get through me?" I asked. "Because that's the only way you can get out of here." We ended up on the couch, kissing and caressing, as always. But I think we both knew it was different. For a long time, I wondered why Tim took so long to get to my panties. I thought maybe he was a 30-year-old virgin, or he just wasn't good in bed. I didn't care. I loved him so much that I just wanted him inside me. Besides, I thought that I would gradually train him and make him better. And finally, we had sex. I was exhausted. I couldn't move. My legs were exhausted from trying to wrap my arms around him. My arms were also too tired to move. But inside my mind, I was seething. I thought about every man who had me over the years and realized that I was simply deceiving myself. They were just using me for their own lust, and I was allowing it. Of course, sometimes they paid my rent or gave me some stupid flowers and sweets. But all this came from men who didn't care about me. They were too embarrassed to be seen with me and just took advantage of me. Now I understood why they didn't want to be seen with me. It had nothing to do with the fact that I was fat. It was because I was stupid enough to let them do this to me. On the other hand, at that moment, I also regretted with all my heart that I had ever had sex with Tim. One of my greatest strengths has always been my independence. If some guy got to me and broke my heart, it didn't really matter because I was always sleeping with a bunch of other guys. I remember one guy I had sex with told me he wouldn't come back anymore because he got engaged and could now have as much sex as he wanted, so he didn't have to have a fat bitch anymore. I told him it was okay because when he got tired of his slender fiancée and all the things she wouldn't do for him, he would try to come back to me and I wouldn't let him. Then I really hurt him by telling him that when he returned home, he told his father that he couldn't come back either. There were always enough guys who wanted me that losing one didn't matter until Tim came along. I knew that if I ever lost him, I probably wouldn't survive. But the months passed, and we only became happier. Before I knew it, we were already engaged. My parents were damn happy about it and threw us a huge engagement party, and that's when the problem started. I made sure my mom and dad invited my sister Cindy. I lost touch with that little bitch because I refused to have anything in common with her after she denied me the opportunity to move in with her. I thought showing her Tim would be the perfect opportunity to spit in her face. I think I put on the most sadistic expression on my face when she first saw Tim. Her jaw dropped and her eyes became huge. "Who is this?" she asked my mother. "This is Mindy's fiancé, Tim," Mom answered. Since then, I have made sure that Cindy is invited to all of our family events. It was really funny to me because this little bitch was banging her head against a brick wall. She was clearly in love with Tim. She wanted him so much that she had no choice but to come to whatever she thought he was coming to, just so she could look at him. Tim didn't even look at her twice. I'm sure she left our parents' house crying a couple of times. My favorite thing was to walk right in front of her and kiss Tim. Sometimes I would put his hands on my fat ass right in front of her. It was just to show her that her slim body and big breasts didn't mean anything. This time I had the guy she wanted and not the other way around. And the icing on the cake was that whenever she had the guy I wanted, I took him away from her. Now that I had the guy she wanted, he didn't even look twice at her. This bitch got what she deserved. And the funny thing was the way she looked. Beautiful legs and a beautiful face were working against her without her even realizing it. Cindy. I couldn't get him out of my head. I was going crazy. From the moment I first laid eyes on Tim, I knew he was my future. I just had to find a way to let him know. It was just surreal. There's this cute, hot guy. He was well-mannered and polite. He was very handsome, but somehow he wasn't a jerk, which was rare. He seemed to have no idea how good he looked. He had a great job, and, judging by the black Mustang GT he drove, he made good money. Judging by my mother's chatter about him, he apparently had a nice home too. He had nothing to do with my sister. Seeing the two of them together gave me a headache. Beauty and the Beast works well as a Disney movie, but I don't buy it in real life. I knew she would only hurt him in the long run. He deserved much better. He deserved me. I know saying this makes me sound like a selfish and jealous bitch. I'm fine with that. Put yourself in my shoes for just a second. Imagine that you are a woman. You eat right and exercise to stay fit. You are relatively beautiful, but not vain. And then you will see the man of your dreams. He's perfect for you. He is slim and well-built. He is shy and polite. He's smart, not to the point of being boring, but still smart. He sits on the grass right in front of you, and then a woman twice his size literally comes and sits on his lap. You can see the concern on his face as her obvious bulk emphasizes both her trust and his physical strength to hold her in his lap. I never had anything against my sister. I love her, I just don't like her, and I have good reasons not to like her. But even after everything she did to me, after all the men she stole from me, I never did anything against her. But knowing Mindy, you really don't have to do anything to her for her to hate you. Not doing what she wants is enough for her to put you on her list of crap. And in my case, all it took was my refusal to let her move in with me and share my apartment. She even got my parents involved. I haven't heard much about them for the last year or so. I was actually surprised when I was invited to this barbecue, but I'm glad I came. The strangest thing about all this is that the barbecue is here, in the house where I grew up, but I feel like a stranger here. Even my parents treat me like a guest. Finally, I managed to approach the guy and introduce myself. "Hi," I said, trying to smile. The butterflies in my stomach immediately begin to flutter. "Hi," he says. There's not as much warmth in his voice as I expected. There is hidden nervousness or fear in his voice. I even feel a slight hidden hostility. "So you," I begin. "I have to go," he says sharply. He then goes to seek safety in the arms of an evil elephant. My sister looks at me over her shoulder and silently laughs at me. Until this moment, I had never hated my sister. I never berated her for her weight, her shitty personality, or how spoiled she was. But it was at this moment that hatred began. Thanks to all the men she took from me and the horrible way I was treated growing up, I was able to give her the benefit of the doubt. I chalked it all up to Mindy being upset or depressed about her weight. At some points, I thought that Mindy had the same problems as our sister Lindy, who was in a boarding school. But in that moment, with Mindy clearly laughing at me and with nothing but hatred in her eyes for me, all those feelings disappeared and war was declared. I said goodbye to my parents and quickly left, citing work. "You work too much," my father said, as if he cared. "You should look for a nice guy like your sister did." I wondered what kind of family we had where the kids who lived on their own and supported themselves were losers in the eyes of their parents compared to the whiners who still needed parental support. The next day was Sunday. I was surprised when my phone rang early in the morning. I picked up the phone without looking at the screen. "Hey sis, you left before the big announcement," Mindy yelled. "What announcement?" I asked, barely recognizing her voice. "Tim and I are engaged," she sang into the phone. "Soon you will have a son-in-law, and someday after that you will become an aunt, and you will have to look after the children." "Are you pregnant?" I asked in shock. I thought it all made sense now. This also partially explained the guy's reaction. He slept with her and accidentally confused her. Now, being the stand-up guy he is, he accepted his responsibilities and married my fat-assed sister. "Of course not," she said. "But I think that after we get married, the next logical step is to have a child. I wonder what our children will look like. Maybe they will be like him and have my character." I thought that the poor guys were going to get screwed anyway, but I didn't say anything. Over the next few weeks, I was often invited to the house for dinners or barbecues, and every time the same three things happened. At every event, Mindy would throw Tim in my face, often knocking him out of my parents' line of sight, but strategically positioned so that I could fully see it. She also said little things just to let me know they were intimate. The second thing that always happened was that I would always try to talk to Tim and would leave almost in tears. "I heard we're going to be a family soon," I told him. He looked at me strangely. "When you marry Mindy, you will be my son-in-law," I offered. "I guess," he said and walked back to Mindy. The third thing that always seemed to happen, and the reason I went to these, other than the opportunity to see Tim, my mom and dad seemed to give me more and more information about Tim every time. I treasured every bit of information as if every detail was a new jewel. But what I really wanted to know was why he hated me so much. I wondered what exactly Mindy told him about me. After a few weeks, I decided to fight back. My parents invited me to what they call the family barbecue. My mom decided we could get together, grill some meat, and start working out the details for Mindy's wedding later that summer. I agreed to come that Sunday. I wasn't ready to hit Mindy back yet, but I was ready to stop getting hit. I decided to block and put up a defense until I was ready to strike. Men have always asked me out, but most of the time it seemed pointless. At work and when I went out with friends, I met a lot of men. Most of them simply didn't interest me. I could see in their eyes what most of these men wanted. The vast majority of them only wanted sex. Some of them were interested in relationships, but they wanted to have a girlfriend or friends with benefits. Most of the men I've encountered were simply not ready for commitment. It's really scary these days. The average man would rather have a girlfriend than a wife. The girl gives them regular sex whenever they want, but also gives them the opportunity to go out and try someone else. And if the next girl is prettier or younger, they'll just come back to you and say, "Listen, honey, we had our time, but it just didn't work out." They take advantage of you while you're young and beautiful, and then move on to the next one when you're exhausted. I didn't want that. I wanted what Mindy had. I wanted Tim. But I decided to take my date with me to the meeting at my parents' house. I thought that at least this way I wouldn't have to listen to my dad telling me I needed to find a nice guy like Mindy did. I also thought that if I was lucky, maybe Tim wouldn't think as badly of me as Mindy probably led him to believe. Everything went much better than I could even dream of. I guess I was just lucky. In fact, it was more than luck, it was damn serendipity. The guy I brought with me was a friend from work. Actually, he wanted to be more than just a friend, but that didn't happen. On paper, he was just what the doctor ordered. He was basically a copy of Tim with blonde hair, but without his personality. He even drove a muscle car. When we pulled up in Charlie's lime green Dodge Challenger, the first thing he did was walk around Tim's jet black Mustang GT. Tim approached him, and they started talking without even introducing themselves. They became instant friends, and little things like names and who they came with didn't matter in the face of their strange language of power and torque, and all those other things they talked about. My father and several other men at the meeting also came up. Apparently, they needed to show that they, too, could qualify for participation in the testosterone festival. My dad didn't know anything about cars, but he had to get in there and pretend. Charlie clearly wanted to impress Tim, so he opened the hood of his car to show Tim something called a Hemi. All the men oohed and awed over the many hoses and wires. My mom even came up to me and patted me on the back. This was the first time in a long time that she tried to get closer to me in some way. The men laughed at something my father said. Tim then led them to his car. He opened the hood of his car, and all the men fell silent. They stood looking at the engine while Tim simply smiled. I kept hearing terms like illegal and supercharger, but Tim kept shaking his head. I thought they were talking about sex. I heard them talking about superchargers, and suddenly this happened. Apparently, testosterone levels could no longer be controlled. Charlie slammed the hood of his car, and so did Tim. They jumped into their cars, and my dad stood in front of them, and the other two guys were so excited they were jumping up and down. I heard my father shout, "Go!" and both cars roared off, leaving clouds of smoke behind them. My mother and I just looked at each other, shaking our heads. Mindy came out of the house and approached us. A few minutes later, Tim pulled up and jumped out of his car with a huge grin on his face. He ran into the backyard. My father and two other guys followed him. They were all drinking beer and had cards in front of them. Charlie arrived a few minutes later, looking around as he got out of his car. He looked around in anger. I pointed him to the backyard. I expected a fight, so I ran into the yard. "You liar!" Charlie shouted, and then all the men began to laugh. Charlie recounted the details of the race from his point of view. Throughout the race, he was only a few seconds behind Tim, who seemed to be slowing down on purpose. As they walked through a winding section of the park, Tim left Charlie further and further behind. Charlie still thought he had a chance to catch Tim as they came around the corners, but Tim just charged ahead, running the red light just as Charlie got to him. Charlie had to stop at a traffic light and was pulled over by the police. He was lucky that they only gave him a speeding ticket when he told them how he had recently bought a car and had gotten a little carried away. Tim and Charlie quickly became friends, and we spent a very enjoyable day together. When I walked over and sat next to Charlie, Tim looked at me, and for the first time there was no hostility in his eyes. There might have been a little nervousness there, but it felt like he was looking at me for the first time. I felt a chill as he nodded slightly, acknowledging my presence. That little nod made the whole day worthwhile. I asked Charlie if he was having a good time, and he said it was the best day he'd had in a long time. "I have to admit," he whispered to me, "I only came here for the chance to go out with you. I've been asking you for months, and you always turned me down. I thought going to some little backyard barbecue would be just as bad as this. It's like pulling teeth without painkillers, but it was fun." I gave him my brightest fake smile. I just realized the reason why nothing could happen between Charlie and me. I needed a guy who loved me enough to just want to spend time with me, no matter what we did. He must have really wanted to meet my family and fit in with it. Charlie clearly saw this as some kind of bargaining. It was like he wasted time with my boring family, and now I had to have sex with him. My suspicion was further confirmed when he turned and asked, "Who the hell is this fat cow?" He almost laughed out loud when I explained that this was my sister and Tim's fiancée. It was difficult for him to contain his laughter. The rest of the day passed in a series of jokes about fat people. "Tim got a better car," he said, "but I got a better girl." I wondered what I had said or done to make him think he got me. "You know," he told me, "at first I thought Tim was falsifying the data about how much torque his car produces. Then he beat me in the race, and I realized that he was not lying. But now I understand why he needs so much torque." I didn't say anything, but he explained anyway. "He needs all that torque to move his car with that fat cow inside." He grinned. I didn't like my sister, but I even thought he was going too far with jokes about her weight. He wasn't even smart enough to notice that I didn't like it. I also noticed that as the day went on, Charlie constantly made excuses for why he lost the race. Tim never mentioned it again. I think the last straw was what happened when we were getting ready to eat. My mother, as usual, prepared 2 plates. Since my dad grilled most of the time, she always brought him his food. My mom and dad have been together and in love since they were old enough to leave their parents' homes. They may not have been the fairest parents, but their love for each other was never in doubt. Hell, I didn't want to compete with what they had. I wanted to join in on this. And it was obvious that Charlie was not my ticket to marital bliss. When he saw my mother serve the plate to my father, Charlie said something so stupid that his words seemed to echo inside me. "Go get me a plate," he said, showing how my mother served my father. I didn't want to start a fight and ruin the day, so I just looked at him strangely and nodded. From the look I gave him when I brought him the plate, Charlie knew what he had done. The good part of this was what happened next. I was reaching for a burger, and my hand collided with something, and I swear to God sparks flew, and my hand fluttered for the rest of the day. I looked up to apologize and noticed that I bumped into Tim's hand as he took Mindy's plate. He smiled at me, and I just froze. For a second, I didn't even realize he was talking to me. Cindy, Mindy wants 2 burgers, he said. Were you going to take more than one for you and Charlie? Because there's only 2 left." I returned to reality. Only 2 thoughts were spinning in my head. First, damn, he's so caring. He didn't say a word about what he would eat himself. I realized that, like me, he would simply take what was left. His main goal is to please my damn sister. My second thought was that he actually knew my name. As I turned to Charlie, I noticed something that made my day. I noticed that my sister Mindy was looking at Charlie as intently as she was at the food. "Tim, the beginning of the end happened on Wednesday evening. I think it was more the end of my stupidity than anything else. I was in my garage installing the front spoiler on my Mustang when someone knocked on the door. I knew it couldn't be Mindy because she worked late on Wednesdays. I hated Wednesdays because I often didn't see her at all on those days. Usually on Wednesdays, she would simply drive home with a friend and go to bed as soon as she arrived. I walked up to the door and looked through the peephole. I was shocked. It was Mindy's sister, Cindy. I wondered what the hell she wanted. I wondered how the hell she even got my address. I opened the door, but left the chain on it. "Hey, Mindy isn't here," I said through the screen door. "I came to you," she said. She seemed to be crying. I had no choice, so I opened the door. "Tim, can I come in?" she asked. I really wanted to say no, but I didn't want to risk Mindy and her parents getting mad at me, so I opened the door. When she entered my house, her head was spinning in different directions, looking at things. "Your house is really nice," she said through tears. "Tim, we have a problem." I couldn't imagine us having anything in common, so the shared problem seemed absurd. However, she was a woman and perhaps a family member in trouble, so I decided to listen to her. "Tim, I have something to tell you, and you're not going to like it," she said. She reached out to grab mine, but I pulled away. "Okay, I'm sure my sister told you all sorts of terrible things about me that weren't true, but somehow you believed them. I'm sure you hate me because of that, but—" She said, "Mindy never said anything bad about you, Cindy," I said. I decided to put her in her place right away before she started lying about my fiancé. She then looked at me with curiosity. "Then why don't you love me?" she asked. "You must have been a cheerleader in school, weren't you?" I asked. "Well, yes," she said, as if she didn't understand that this had anything to do with anything. "To be expected," I said. "You look like that, so why are you here?" She looked even more confused. "Do you remember Charlie?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Your boyfriend, huh? Good guy." She shook her head. "Tim, he's not my boyfriend. When you two met, it was the first and last date. And I'm sorry, but he's really not a nice guy. I know you like him, and you probably think he's your friend because you have this common love of cars, but he's not really a nice guy." "And what does this have to do with me?" I asked. "Tim," she looked at me, and even though I didn't love her, my heart sank because it was clear that she was in pain. She really was beautiful. In fact, she wasn't just beautiful, Cindy was stunning. "Tim," she repeated, "I need to show you something. I know you don't love me, but at least this time can you come with me? And after you see this, we will need to talk. Maybe after you see this, everything will be clear to you, and you won't want to talk to me. That's normal, but you still need to see it." I nodded, but I had a bad feeling. I was sure it was going to be one of those weird situations that they make movies about on Lifetime. Maybe Charlie was involved with something bad, and she needed me to help him break his addiction. Or perhaps it was even more interesting. Maybe Charlie was involved in illegal street racing, and since my car was much faster than his, she decided to seek my help to get him out of it. I smiled imagining this. I followed her to her car. I was shocked. She had a good car, a Ford Fusion. This is the same car that NASCAR painted its Gen 6 Ford version on. We didn't talk while it was driving, which was good because we didn't have much in common. I was a little scared to be around her because I didn't quite tell her the truth. Mindy didn't really say anything bad about Cindy, but she did tell me how things always work out easier for Cindy. We pulled up to an apartment building on the other side of town. She looked at her watch several times, and we settled down to wait. I didn't know what we were waiting for, but we were waiting. "You have a nice car," I said to start a conversation. "Thank you," she replied and smiled at me. "Why didn't your parents buy the same car for Mindy?" I asked. She looked at me as if I had insulted her. "Tim, I paid for my car myself," she said. "I've always paid my own expenses. Just because my parents still pay a lot of Mindy's expenses doesn't mean they do the same for me. Mindy is the one who gets everything handed to her on a silver platter. I have to work for it. What I have, and—" She stopped mid-sentence when I saw Charlie leave the building and walk towards his Challenger. He got into the car and quickly drove away. Cindy started her car and drove off, but in a different direction. "We won't go after him?" I asked. "For what?" she answered. "I don't want him to see us, and it doesn't mean I don't know where he's going." Cindy's route was more efficient. We actually arrived in time to see Charlie get out of his car and walk into the library. I was confused and alarm bells started ringing in my head. I wondered why the hell Charlie was walking into the library where Mindy was working. There were at least 3 libraries in the city, and this one was probably the farthest from his apartment. Secondly, the library was closed. Mindy and the other librarians spent Wednesday evenings doing inventory and other things. He won't be able to enter, or so it seemed to me. Charlie walked around the building to a side door. There was a big, closed sign on the door. He pulled the door, and it opened easily. This door never opened, even when the library was open. In fact, the only light that was on was in the basement of the library, and that light was dim. "Let's go," Cindy said. We got out of her car and headed towards the library. We opened the side door and entered. We went down to the basement. I was there a few times to help Mindy as she took inventory. When we walked down the stairs and opened the door, the smell of sex was so strong that it knocked me off my feet. In the center of the room, among the bookshelves, I saw at least 5 men surrounding one fat woman. They took turns having sex with her while she moaned and asked for more. I was so angry that I was ready to rush in there and beat them all to a pulp. Cindy tugged at my arm and pulled me aside just in time. A couple more guys came in through the same door we came in through and started taking off their clothes as they went. I noticed Cindy had her phone in her hand and was taking photos or videos. She turned it off and grabbed my hand again. "Let's go," she said. "I'm now," I began. "No, you won't," she answered sharply. "We need to talk." I was so angry I could barely think, so I let her get me out of there. "Why did you stop me?" I shouted at her. As soon as we walked away from the building, another guy came inside. "You just want to protect your boyfriend. You just don't want me to beat up Charlie," I yelled. She looked at me calmly as she drove and kept shaking her head. "Tomorrow you'll obviously need to go to the doctor and get some tests," she said. She pulled into the park and grabbed a can of cherry Pepsi from the cooler in the back seat. "What is this?" I asked. "This is your favorite drink," she said. "I thought it would help calm you down." "I'll calm down after," I began. "Tim, there were at least 8 men there," she said. "All that would happen is that you would get beaten up. We need to think about it and decide with a cool head what we're going to do about it." "What do you mean we?" I asked. "Okay," she said angrily. "It's a tough situation, Tim, but I'm not your enemy. In fact, ever since we met, you've treated me like crap. I've never said a word to you, so why do you hate me?" I opened a can of soda and drank it in one gulp. "Cindy, I think you're right," I admitted. "It wasn't about you. Like you said, you never tried to be bad for me. It all had to do with something that happened to me a long time ago. When I was in high school, I had a crush on one girl in my class. She was beautiful like you, and she was a cheerleader like you. She fooled me and let me buy her things. I gave her my pocket money and, in general, acted like a fool for the sake of it. Her. This first love can be tough. I was obsessively attracted to her, but she just never paid attention to me. After a few months of this, I simply asked her what it would take for us to become more than friends. She told me that if I wanted to be with her, I needed to get on the soccer team. So the next day I went to the screening. I thought I had a better than average chance. I was in good shape and played football with my friends all the time. And here I am on the field. I stood up as the receiver. When the ball was thrown, I ran the route. I got to the right place. I looked at the quarterback, and I knew at that moment that something was wrong. He shook his head even as he threw the ball to me. I jumped and caught the ball, and 3 huge defenders tackled me as if they had been waiting for this moment. They hit me so hard that I lost consciousness for a second. Even when I came to my senses, I couldn't breathe. The coach came up, and when I opened my eyes, he started screaming. "Get up, boy," he said. "Rub it with mud. Get up, let's try again." I couldn't feel my legs or anything. He looked deep into my eyes and realized that I would probably never even watch football on TV again. "Next," he shouted. While I was trying to move my limbs to make sure I could still move on my own and nothing was broken, I heard the sound of a very harsh but familiar voice laughing hysterically at me. This was my supposed cheerleader girlfriend. She was sitting in the stands with an older guy who looked like a biker, pointing at me and laughing until she cried. Two huge guys who knocked me down picked me up and dragged me off the field. "Let's call your mom," one of them said. "Daphne has done her thing again," said another. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Man, these cheerleaders are weird as hell," the first guy said again. "Especially Daphne. She goes around looking for guys to humiliate," he said. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Did you give her money?" "So I stayed away from the cheerleaders from then on," I told her. "I know it's stupid, but I was young and impressionable, and she was so beautiful. I just could never forget it. And damn, you look like her and—" "So you think I'm beautiful?" she asked. "Yes," I admitted. "But most women who are beautiful are F***head up in the head. They act like they don't need a personality because they're beautiful. I've always looked more at a woman's personality and how she treats me than her looks." "Mindy," I started. "I can't believe she—" "So you still want to marry my sister?" she asked. I looked at her like she was crazy. "What did I do to make her start doing this?" I asked. She looked at me and shook her head. She took my hand and told me her story, and the story of the Mindy I never knew. "So you didn't do anything to make her start this," she said. "Mindy has always been like this. She may have slowed down and does it less now that you're together. But for some reason, she just can't give it up. You'll probably have to ask her about that. As for why she is sleeping with Charlie, I think it's more about showing me who's boss again." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Tim, for the last few months Mindy has been inviting me to family events and forcing my parents to invite me too. She was doing this to get you in my face. It's like she wanted to show me that she finally has a man and I can't take him away. For most of our lives, she enjoyed stealing guys from me, and now that she has her own man, you don't even look at me." "Okay, you said she steals your guys," I said. "But I still don't understand how she does it. You're really beautiful." "Mindy will sleep with anyone who asks," she said bitterly. "And I have to get to know a guy first, and I don't have sex with most people I date. For example, I never slept with Charlie. But Mindy thought we were in a relationship, so she had to prove to me that she could still take something from me." Mindy. When I woke up on Thursday, I felt some anxiety. Tim usually called me on Wednesdays, even if we weren't together. If I came home late from my Wednesday errands, he would either wait to call or leave a message saying he loved me if he went to bed early. But this time, there was nothing. I called him when I got home last night, but he didn't answer. He also didn't call in the morning to see if I needed a ride to the library. In the end, I had to take the bus. As soon as I got to the library, I called him at work. His secretary said he was called into an early morning meeting. She told me that he found out about a problem with some of their parts last night and even went back to work to try to find a solution. Otherwise, the company would lose millions of dollars. I smiled, realizing that the problem was not between us, but just work matters. This brought me back to my other problem. Charlie wanted time alone with me. This bastard was blackmailing me. I made a mistake when I decided to get him. I thought I was taking another guy away from Cindy, but it turns out she brought him along just for company. After the barbecue, they never met again. Now Charlie was demanding more sex, threatening to tell Tim what I was doing, and I couldn't let that happen. I needed to find a solution. I spent every evening with Tim except Wednesday. Maybe I could get Charlie to settle for meeting on Wednesdays before the others arrived or after they left. For a guy who initially laughed at me when I asked him for sex, he couldn't get enough. I've seen people like him before. At first, they did this out of frustration with my sister or to get back at her for not wanting to sleep with them. But as soon as they tried it, they forgot about it. Part of the problem was that I almost stopped doing it. Of course, I still participated in Wednesday meetings, but it was more like a security blanket. Sex with Tim was so much better that there was no comparison. I also realized that this security blanket was pointless. If Tim ever leaves me, it will destroy me. Going out and having meaningless, passionless sex with a bunch of strangers won't help. I was in love. I was ashamed of having sex with other guys, but I did it for so long that I just couldn't stop. I still did the occasional quick thing with the courier and others, but mostly on Wednesdays I was a constant cheater. I used to probably have sex almost every night with a different guy. I was becoming an old married lady without even getting married, and I loved it. I think it dawned on me on Thursday night when I still hadn't heard from Tim. I called him, and he sounded terrible. He told me not to worry, but he had been up for over 30 hours and was exhausted. I went to my mother, and we sat down to discuss the details of my wedding. She asked me who I had chosen to be my bridesmaid and bridesmaid. I was surprised when she suggested Cindy. I immediately called my sister and asked her to come. Cindy sounded weird on the phone, but said she would be there in a few minutes. The only reason I wanted Cindy to come was so I could hook her up. Having this bitch help with my wedding was the ultimate way to spite her. Yeah, bitch, you're helping with my wedding. I'm the one who gets married when no one wants your skinny ass. When Cindy arrived, she smiled at me. I needed to wipe that stupid smile off her face. "How's Charlie?" I asked. "You probably know better than me," she grinned. "I never took Charlie seriously," she said. "He was yours from the very beginning." "What nonsense are you talking about?" I asked. "Charlie was bait, you fat ass," she grinned. "I knew that no matter who I paid attention to, you would follow him. So I brought you the bastard to feed you while I kept the real guy a secret. I hope you choke on Charlie." It took the wind out of me. I spent the rest of the evening watching Cindy and my mom discuss my wedding. Now I was stuck with my narcissistic sister as a witness and had to figure out how to get rid of Charlie without letting Tim find out what I had done. Trust this bitch, she always ruins everything. And besides, now she will be in all wedding photographs. On Friday, Tim picked me up as usual. I was ready to go straight to his house, but he wanted to go somewhere. "I need to show everyone my beautiful girlfriend," he said, "so dress up." We went to a great restaurant. There was a dance floor and live music. We danced the night away. I had a great time and was looking forward to what was to come. I couldn't wait to get Tim naked. Tim took me where no other man had ever taken me. Part of this was because the world is just a confusing place. Men who like heavier girls are considered weird. For most of history, fuller women have been a priority. Marilyn Monroe was definitely not skinny. Plus-size women also have more attractive features and tend to have a stronger sex drive. But even so, Tim was simply better. I think part of it is that most of the guys I slept with were just using me. They wanted me because they could do things with me that their wives or girlfriends would never allow. They loved their women, but they wanted me. This was another reason why I preferred married men. They had a lot to lose, just like I did. This was another reason why Charlie was a mistake. I thought Charlie was so afraid of losing Cindy that he would never say a word about me. But since he and Cindy weren't in a relationship, he didn't care who knew, and I found myself in a position where I had a lot to lose. Charlie was also cruel. I still remember how much he hurt me on Wednesday night. But my Tim loved me. When I thought about this, I began to understand that I needed to stop these Wednesday meetings. But it was like an addiction. I knew it was bad for me, but I couldn't stop. I don't think I did it for sex. I think it was more the psychological pleasure of having all these guys focusing on me. All my life, every day, people looked at me with pity. "Oh, look at the poor fat thing." Most guys would shudder at the thought of me being their girlfriend. But as soon as I dragged them into the darkness, they always wanted more. They had me until they ran out of strength. My biggest shock came when Tim took me back to my small, crummy apartment instead of taking me to his home. On weekends, he usually left me with him. To be honest, for many weeks I spent every night with him except Wednesday. He even had my things, and I had my own toothbrush in his house. In short, I was surprised. "Sorry, honey," he said. "I need to be at work in the morning." As soon as Tim left, I called Charlie. Charlie was on a date with some woman. He walked away from her and started talking. "What?" he asked. "How about tonight or tomorrow afternoon?" I asked. "How about both?" he replied. "Let me get rid of this annoying bitch, and I'll come right away." It was the biggest mistake I've ever made. Charlie arrived and simply took off his clothes. There was no pretense or politeness. "Can you be a little more gentle?" I asked. He just laughed. Then a thought occurred to me. "Has Cindy called you yet?" I asked. He stopped and even grabbed my breasts. "Why should she call me?" he asked. He tried to keep his tone neutral, but I could hear the interest in his voice. "Cindy hasn't decided what she wants yet," I said. "She's dated a lot of guys, but she always talks about you. Cindy is not the kind of woman who sleeps with everyone. She's looking for something serious, and I think she wants to try with you again because she didn't like most of the guys she dated." He was so happy that he smiled. My ass was bruised. I couldn't let Tim see this. "See you Wednesday," he said as he walked out the door. "I don't think so," I answered. "If I'm not invited, I'll call Tim," he laughed. I started crying when he closed the door. Cindy. I never lied to Tim, even from the very beginning. When he suggested that I was just telling him about Mindy to help my boyfriend, I agreed with him and was 100% honest. What Tim didn't know was that Charlie wasn't my boyfriend. When I said my boyfriend, I was talking about Tim, even though he wasn't my boyfriend yet. In the days that followed, I was happier than I had ever been in my life. I watched Tim gain strength and overcome his pain and shock from what my sister did to him. He did this mainly because he thought we were going through this together, and he needed to be strong to help me. I know it was a little unfair to let him think I was suffering because of Charlie, but in the end it brought us closer, and I have no regrets. On Thursday morning, Tim asked his secretary to help him avoid Mindy while he was driving to the clinic for an STD test. I helped him practice, trying to look normal in front of Mindy. It took me a while to convince him that the rough approach just wouldn't work. If he had gone there aggressively, he would have simply ended up in an even worse situation. One of the guys who regularly attended Mindy's group sex parties was a high-ranking official in the local police force. Tim and I put our heads together and came up with a better way to deal with this. In the days leading up to our surgery, I enjoyed the time I spent with my sister discussing her wedding. She specifically chose the ugliest bridesmaid dresses I've ever seen. It seemed like she was deliberately trying to make me look as bad as possible. The dress had a huge ruffle at the bust line, which I assume was intended to hide my breasts. The dress I was supposed to wear as a witness had an ugly hat with some kind of veil on it. This surprised me until the woman at the store said that Mindy designed the hat and veil herself. I just laughed about it, mainly because I knew that I would never wear it because there would be no wedding, and deep inside I realized that this could turn against me. When this was all over, I could lose my parents if they sided with Mindy like they always did. Perhaps I will be left without Tim. As strange as it may sound, the chance to be with Tim was worth sacrificing his family. Old proverbs can go to hell. Is family everything? Not when your family is clearly dysfunctional and biased. Is blood thicker than water? Well, love is thicker than blood. Tim. I made it through the weekend and felt stronger. When I first saw what was happening and what Mindy was doing, it felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. For most of my life, starting in high school, I protected myself by only picking the low-hanging fruit. I deliberately avoided the most beautiful girls. I only dated women who had great personalities. I didn't care about physical disabilities because I really wanted to find someone who would love me and treat me well. All the slim, beautiful women usually acted either arrogantly or thought their shit didn't smell. I preferred plump girls with a normal head on their shoulders. With Mindy, it wasn't love at first sight. I was attracted to how she helped me in the library and how nice she was. And then I was attracted to her big round ass and breasts, and I wanted to continue the relationship. I figured that maybe no one else wanted her, and we could live our lives together without jealousy and all that nonsense, but it wasn't meant to be. Talking to Cindy made me see Mindy for who she really is. On Friday night, I saw Charlie come into Mindy's apartment after I dropped her off at home. I had no illusions about why he went there. On Saturday, Mindy called me and told me that her mom was a little sick, and she was staying with her parents for the weekend to help take care of her. I asked Cindy to stop by on Saturday morning, and she called me from her parents' house and said her mom was okay, but Mindy had a bruise on her face. When we compared our observations, we both came to the conclusion that Mindy and Charlie's Friday night encounter was probably too violent. Cindy reminded me that this is actually a good thing. At least now I won't have to come up with a reason why I can't have sex with Mindy on the weekend. Saturday night, Cindy came over to my house and cooked me dinner. We discussed the details of the plan and talked about what each of us wanted from life. She made me realize that when our plan was completed, it wouldn't just be the end. I had several options. All that will happen, she said, is that Mindy and Charlie will know that we know what's going on. This in itself doesn't mean anything. You and I will have to make decisions about how to proceed. Fortunately, neither of us is married. In my case, that means it's over between me and Charlie. We have no hope and no future. Tim, all I need is a man who will love me. I need someone who can put up with my quirks and be faithful to me. On the other hand, I will love him like no one else. He will become the center of my life, the only owner of my heart and the father of my children. She ran her hands over her chest, along her sides and over her thighs. All this will be his only, she said, looking at me. Unlike my sister, he will never have to share me with anyone. I think my sip was heard in the next state. But he will also have some problems to deal with, she continued. Sexually, I don't have as much experience as my sister, so he might have to teach me some things. I had a hard time concentrating while she was talking. But don't worry about me, she smiled. Now that I know what a jerk Charlie is, I'm sure I won't have any problems finding someone who can put up with me. What about you, Tim? Oh, I would. What do you mean? I asked. I almost blurted out that I would gladly put up with her, but fortunately, I restrained myself in time so as not to embarrass myself. What are you going to do with Mindy? She asked. Will you make her jump through hoops to earn your forgiveness? Will you make your own rules? Or will you just have a stern conversation with her? None of this, I said sadly. Cindy, I know she's your sister, but I can't forgive her. I can never trust her again. I keep thinking about how many times she came home and climbed into bed with me after being with another man or several. I don't even know if I received what is called second rate or 10th rate. It's over between Mindy and me. There is no turning back. Maybe if it was just one guy she's known for a long time, and no, I won't lie to you. I think, like you, Cindy, I need to know that my partner is my partner. I just can't share and tolerate lies. Trust is a big issue for me. She came up to me and took my hand. You know, I understand that you don't love me, and we were just brought together by circumstances, but you have a friend who will help you get through this, no matter how long it takes you, she said. I looked into her big, beautiful eyes and immediately looked away. You're not that bad, I blushed. So Monday morning, I went back to work as usual. I didn't see Mindy all weekend, and I think that really helped. Another old proverb that turns out to be complete nonsense is the one that states that absence makes the heart grow fonder. Absence really helps you forget. I think it's more like out of sight, out of mind. I worked my ass off, went out several times to buy things we would need for our plan. Cindy was really helpful. She was the one who brought Jeff into our plan. Jeff worked for a gas company. His sister was the wife of one of the guys Mindy slept with. By pretending to look for a gas leak, Jeff was able to break into the library on Friday and install several small video cameras. We had 2 cameras at different angles in the pantry. We also had several cameras in the hallway leading there. What Jeff received in return was a copy of the videotapes that his sister could use in her divorce proceedings as she planned to rip off her husband. They were married for over 10 years and had 2 children. I couldn't understand why Jeff's husband would cheat with Mindy. His wife was about the same size as Mindy and a little prettier. It didn't make sense until Cindy reminded me how dirty Mindy could be. There are some things that most women don't do, but Mindy has no such restrictions. Around lunchtime, all my worries and stress returned with renewed vigor. My phone rang, and I automatically picked it up. I'm upset, she said. Me too, I hissed. I almost forgot that I had to keep pretending that everything was fine between us. You know, most guys call their girlfriends at least a couple of times a weekend to find out how they are doing, she said in an offended voice. Why do you think I'm upset? I asked. I called you on Saturday afternoon, and your sister said that the sound of the phone might upset your mother. I had to go without my Mindy for 2 days. That bitch, she said. Wait, I'll get to her. So I'll definitely see you tonight, right? I asked, sounding desperate. And we'll stay home, right? I asked. I took a chance, but Cindy told me that the bruises on Mindy's face were healed enough to be covered up with makeup. But she also said that Mindy was still rubbing her butt on Sunday afternoon. Do you think you only need me for this? Do you think I'm just a big ass and a couple of breasts? Asked Mindy. No, dear, but... I began. Mindy, I'm sorry. I will never expect you to want to have sex with me again. We can just... No, she almost screamed. Honey, I want you too. I'm just angry about this. I have my period, and it is very heavy today. I love you so much, Tim. You should know that. Oh, Mindy, I have to go, I said. I was called to the next meeting. See you in the evening. I laughed as I hung up and called Cindy. Hello, she said in her working voice. Guess who just called me, I said. Her voice immediately became much more joyful. Hi, Tim, she said. It felt like my call made her day. Who called you? Mindy, I said. I think I held on, but you may have to suffer for the cause. Oh, so we're a team now? She asked. I could imagine her twirling a lock of her long, straight blonde hair on her finger as she sat at her desk. And what exactly do I need to do for this team? She laughed. I explained what happened, and she laughed. You know she'll be mad at me, she said. This is a big sacrifice for the team. You don't love her anyway, I complained. But you don't love her, and you're engaged to her, she said. And what? I continued. You are her sister. I will only be engaged to her until the day after tomorrow. You will be her sister forever. I doubt it, she said. We were never close, and after all this is revealed, she and my parents will probably want nothing more to do with me. I'll be alone again. No, you won't stay, I said before my brain could kick in. How can you be alone if you have me? I heard her take a sharp breath over the phone. I mean, well, as a friend, I quickly added. Okay, I'll do it for the team, she said. But the team will have to treat me to lunch on Thursday when this is all over. Agreed, I said. Monday evening and Tuesday were pure torture. I picked Mindy up from the library on Monday evening. I hugged her and grabbed her big ass with both hands. She tensed, as if my touch to her still sore buttocks caused her pain. After dinner, we lay on my couch to watch a movie, and I started teasing her. I put my hand in her panties. Where is your gasket? I asked. What? She moaned. Gasket, I repeated. You said you were on your period, remember? Oh, she said, squeezing her legs and sitting up. I use tampons. I didn't feel the thread, I said. She's there, she hissed angrily. Maybe you should take me home, Tim. Why? I grumbled. I don't know what's wrong with you, she blurted out. I told you I'm on my damn period. But you drive me crazy. I think you're so desperate for sex that you forget about me. I don't think you love me. Okay, I'll take you home. Perhaps it was all a mistake, I said. Her eyes became huge. What are you talking about, Tim? She said. What kind of mistake? Well, you know, this whole situation. You and me, I said. Tim, I'm sorry. I'm just irritable, she said. You know that I get irritable during my period. I'll still take you home, I said. And I took her home, and she apologized all the way and assured me that she loved me and that she would do anything for me. I don't think so, Mindy, I told her. Everything has changed. I think I'm starting to understand what would happen if we got married. I think you would go from being my sweet, sexy, loving Mindy to one of those grumpy women who doesn't like sex, and I would have to go without it for long periods of time. Tim, she begged, I swear to God, this will never happen again. For the rest of our lives, I will make love to you every day, twice a day if you want. I want you so much that it hurts. We'll see, I said. On Tuesday night, we both apologized. Mindy was very nice. She said it brought her to tears to think that a man wanted her so much that he was upset that he couldn't be with her, and that we would have a perfect life together. I reminded her as I drove her home that we wouldn't see each other on Wednesday because she had a night shift at the library, but on Thursday I would take her out to a nice dinner. No way, she said. On Thursday evening, you and I will tear down your bed, honey. You'll see. Jeff has already given me some videos from the library. Judging by them, on Monday my loving Mindy pleased the courier for delivering a shipment of books on time. Another tape showed her sleeping with a copy machine technician the previous Friday for fixing a fax machine. These tapes wouldn't help Jeff's sister, so he didn't even want a copy. I'm not into big women, he said. It's a pity that Cindy is not like her sister. I don't know why, but it pissed me off. Relax, dude, he said. I didn't mean anything bad. She's just cool and all, you know. I nodded. Sorry, Jeff, I said. Does she know? He asked. Of course, she knows that her sister is easily accessible. No, Tim, he said. Does she know that she likes you? The way she talks about you, I think she likes you too. But such women are not lonely for long. So if she doesn't know, maybe you should tell her. We had to make a few changes on Wednesday. Jeff wanted to be there, and so did his sister. She was furious and could barely contain herself. Jeff wanted to be there to protect his sister. On the other hand, I had to tell Cindy that I didn't want her there. What are you talking about, Tim? She asked. Of course, I'll be there. No, you won't, I said. Trust me, I can handle it. But I have nothing to lose. I don't want you to be cut off from your family if we can avoid it. I'll make sure Charlie gets what he deserves. She threw back her head and laughed. Tim, it was never for Charlie. I only met this idiot once. We never had a relationship. I never wanted to marry him and become Cindy Brown. I only brought Charlie once because I was tired of being reproached by you all the time. I never reproached you, I said. I didn't say that you reproached me. I said that they reproached you. Mindy always used you to show that she was better than me. She had the perfect guy who loved her, and I always worked until exhaustion and achieved nothing. I always told you how our parents treated us. I worked hard at school and got straight A's. My parents didn't notice this. Mindy never did anything. She would bring home C's or D's, and her parents would praise her and tell her how hard school was for her, she said. Cindy jumped up and began to passionately prove her point. I needed to calm the situation. I gently stroked her arm and then sat her back down on the sofa. Okay, I understand, I said. That's why I don't want you there. I'm pretty sure, based on what you said, that the parents will side with Mindy when this all comes to light. They're going to hate me, and that's okay, because without Mindy in my life, I don't need them. But if they find out you were involved. Tim, when I told them that Mindy couldn't move in with me and live at my expense, I didn't hear from my parents for over a year. No call, no visit, no letter, not even on a birthday. The next time I heard from any of them was an invitation from Mindy to meet, so she could throw you in my face. So in a way, I never had my parents. I was allowed to use Mindy's parents. If everything stays like this, then I'm better off without them. Okay, compromise, I said. You can be there. You can videotape everything from outside through the window. That way, you'll be present, but Mindy won't see you in the chaos, and you'll still have a chance to keep your family together. I agree, she said, but it will cost you another lunch. No, I want dinner at one of those places you took Mindy to that she talked about so enthusiastically. I want a fancy dinner where you have to sit at a table. Agreed, I said. We shook hands. Mandy. I wanted Tim so badly that I could almost taste him. I thought about just canceling my plans for Wednesday night, but that would be difficult to explain to Tim. There was also the problem with Charlie that needed to be resolved. There was no way I was going to let him ruin everything. Perhaps the best solution would be to gradually get out of this situation. Maybe I could set a time frame or limit it to meetings every other Wednesday. But tonight I was already fully involved, and I needed to work out something with Charlie. I realized that he was taking out his anger at Cindy on me. My butt was still red, but the bruises were gone. But he had to understand that he never had the right to hit me again. By hiding what Charlie did from Tim, I seriously damaged our relationship. This week has been very stressful for us, and all because I had to hide the marks of the beating from Tim. As usual, my stupid boss left at least an hour before closing. When it was time to close the doors, I did so. She politely escorted the last regular customers out and locked the front doors. Then she turned off the light and opened the side door. I knew it would be at least half an hour before anyone showed up, so I called my sister to tell her off for the lie she told Tim over the weekend. She didn't answer the phone, so I left her a message. Then I called Tim to tell him how much I was looking forward to tomorrow night. I told him to get a good night's sleep because after this, he would never be able to rest properly again. I have no idea why the guys always came in twos. Perhaps since the building was supposed to be closed, they thought showing up alone might look like a break-in or something illegal. And when they arrived in groups, it looked like some kind of meeting. The first to arrive were Ray Smith, some policeman, and his new friend. I never minded when guys I'd known for a while brought friends. They pushed me against the wall and lifted my skirt. Then the real madness began. Then the situation got even wilder. The doors burst open with a bang, and I think I saw two guys enter. After that, I started hearing screams. But it wasn't the screams of the men next to me. And these were not moans or cries of pleasure. These were screams of pain. One guy, a very big guy, was running around the room, grabbing the pants and clothes of everyone present, and ran out of the room. Another guy just walked through all the men, holding a stun gun in one hand and a large slaughterhouse electrode in the other. He hit the men with a stun gun on the body wherever he could reach. I saw Ray walk up to this guy and get tased for his efforts. Ray was curled up on the floor, twitching uncontrollably. Then the second guy returned to the room and slammed the door. There was a woman with him, and she turned on all the lights in the room. My head exploded, and I realized I was in trouble. I screamed, no, with all my might. There was no way I was going to let Tim see me like that. "Hey, where are my clothes?" asked one of the guys. Tim walked straight towards me and smiled. Before Tim approached me, I heard a woman yelling at Sam. "You're finished, you pathetic coward," she screamed. "When my lawyer is done with you, you will be homeless, but you will still work for me. You will never see your children again." She hit Sam and slapped him so hard it hurt even me. Sam begged her for something and told her that everything was not what she thought. Then she turned to me. "I'll kill you, you fat bitch," she screamed. She ran towards me. She started kicking me and calling me all sorts of names. The big guy with Tim pulled her away from me. "Gentlemen," Tim shouted, getting everyone's attention. "Do you believe in justice?" All the men in the room were too stunned to respond. They all gathered in a corner, naked. No one wanted to face the taser or slaughterhouse electrode that Tim was holding. "I was in love once," Tim said. "My beloved was a large woman. Her name was—" "Mandy," someone shouted, wanting to help. "Exactly," Tim said. "So, I loved her more than you can imagine, until a friend told me that she was the lowest, dirty, disgusting bitch on the planet. Despite how much I loved her, there were many times when I didn't get sex from her because she was sharing what should have belonged to her future husband with a bunch of freaks who don't care about her. Let's see, come to think of it, those freaks got what should have been mine. It's not fair, is it?" Tim asked. "Yes," said several timid voices. "But Tim, you're the only one I love," I said. "Honey, you have to let me explain. We can work things out." "Shut up, bitch," the woman said. She walked up to me and kicked me again, then snatched the stun gun from Tim's hands and placed it on my left breast. She didn't just touch me like Tim did with men. She pressed it against my sensitive skin and held it there. I lost consciousness. When I came to my senses, a man from their company was patting me on the face. "Damn, I almost thought you killed her," he said. It's a pity I didn't kill you, the woman replied. Anyway, Tim continued, my relationship is over. It's your fault. My engagement is broken. It's your fault. My heart is broken, and again, it's your fault. What do I get as a result? What do you want? Asked one of the guys. The first thing I want, Tim said, is for all of you, especially you, Ray, to look out the window. If you look closely, you will see a red light. This red light is on the video camera that is recording us right now and has been doing so since Ray and his friend came in tonight. The men began to whisper. If you know my name, you know I'm a cop, Ray said, so you know that I can make your life very difficult. There's nothing you can do, Ray, Tim said, because if you're a cop, you have twice as much to lose as everyone else. If this video gets out, in addition to losing your wife and children, you will lose your job and career and become the laughingstock of the entire law enforcement community. No, Ray said. You might be wondering how I know who you all are, Tim continued. I don't know all of you, but I know some of you. He crossed the room and hit Charlie in the face so hard that Charlie's head snapped back. Charlie met Mandy's sister here. Now he's dating his boss's daughter. How do you think your boss, Charlie, will take this video? I think as soon as he sees it, you'll have to look for a new job. How many years have you been working there? As for you, Ray, I'm very interested in you, Ray. Your wife is beautiful. She's slim, she has a figure like a brick house, and she loves you like crazy. How many years have you been together? 17, Ray nodded. It could all end here, Ray, Tim said. If I ever get a speeding ticket or even a warning, this video will be on YouTube within 10 minutes. Videos from last week and the first part of today's events have already been uploaded to a secure server and to a couple of my friends who live in other states. If anything happens to me, the tape will come out. Then all the men began to whisper. Like I said, I don't know all of you yet, Tim said. Some of you may not care about anything other than your reputation. Some of you are single and self-employed, but even those people won't want this video on the internet. I'm thinking about selling the record. They'll probably give it some really cool names. I will make sure that all of you are recognized for your work. That way you can't sue me for copyright infringement or anything like that. And by morning, I will recognize all of you. Our friend is copying your driver's licenses right now, so I'll have your home addresses and all your other information. This way, each of you will be able to receive a copy of the recording by mail. Please, no, a man shouted from the back of the room. I'll do anything, just don't do this. Well, Tim said, I'm going to take a couple of days to think about it. You guys are so well organized and had my fiancée together, so I will leave it to you to think of a proposal together to compensate me for what you stole from me. I will meet with your representative on Monday afternoon in the same library. But remember, if anything suspicious happens, the recording will be released, and we will send copies to all your homes and places of work. Clear? Yes, said several men. Your clothes are in the corridor outside the door. Your wallets will be returned to you by mail within a few days. Good night. Tim and Jeff moved to the wall to allow the men to pass them by. Ray approached them. Tim, I know your father, Ray said. He's a good man and... That has nothing to do with this, Tim replied sharply. You have it all, Ray. All I wanted was a small part of what you have. I have no idea why you're doing this. Angie is just like you said, Tim, he said. She's beautiful, and I love her so much it's crazy. I would do anything for her, and she would do anything for me. But sex with her is boring. Believe it or not, Mandy saved my marriage. Instead of arguing with Angie about what she doesn't want to do, I just show up to Mandy. And you must understand that our relationship with her began long before you got along with her. Damn, I expected her to stop, especially after you got engaged. But I just thought that since she's still doing it, I'll take advantage of it. If this means anything, I'm sorry and I hope we can find some way to work things out for you. I will help in any way possible. Even if the other guys go crazy, I hope we can find a way to keep my family together, and I swear to you that this won't happen again. I simply nodded to him. Tim, Mandy pleaded, I just shook my head and left the room. "Tim, please," she shouted after me. The next morning, I received a call from Mandy's mother. "Tim, can I come to your office today to talk?" she asked. "Of course," I said. Less than an hour later, she was sitting at the table across from me. "Tim, Mandy cried all night," she said. "She literally cried all night. There was nothing we could do to calm her down or comfort her. What do we need to do to get you two back together and get your wedding preparations back on track? I know Mandy is a little spoiled. It's probably her father's fault, but she loves you. Whatever is going on between you, it can't be serious enough to give up on how happy you were with each other. Before this, I had never heard my daughter apologize to anyone. I can't believe you won't accept her apology." "Do you know what we fight about?" I asked her. "Not really," she said, "but this can't be." "Ask her what it's about," I said. "If she doesn't tell, I will, but I want to give her the opportunity to tell you first." I guess I thought that after I got my revenge on Mandy, I would feel better. But no, I only got worse. I truly loved Mandy, so her pain became my pain. I spent Friday evening and the rest of the weekend with Cindy. We watched movies together, played games, and went for rides in the car. "Cindy, shouldn't you be with your family, helping Mandy get through this?" I asked. "Tim, my mom and dad are surrounded by their baby. They completely forgot about me, as usual. I left them a couple of messages to see how they were or what they were doing, but they didn't respond. I visited them on Saturday morning before I went to see you. They were evasive and couldn't wait for me to leave. I think they were worried that I would laugh at Mandy or tease her while she was suffering." I just shook my head. "When I have children, I will love them all equally, as families should," I said. She simply smiled. "So everything you were worried about didn't happen," she said. "Even though they didn't know I had anything to do with it, they still left me out. I'd rather have a friend who cares about me enough to try to protect me than a family that ignores me." "About this," I began, "someone told me that I should tell you." "You mean Jeff thought you should tell me you love me?" she smiled. "Yes, that's it," I said. "I didn't think it was worth bringing up because when you smile at me, it's like the warm sun warming my whole body," she said. "Several things happened Monday afternoon. First, Jeff and I met with a representative from the group. Ray slid a piece of paper across the table to me. 'This is the best we could come up with,' he said. I looked at the paper that had the number on it. The amount was $100,000. "That's not enough," I said. "What do you want?" he asked. "Ray, I never needed money," I said. "I already told you, all I ever wanted was for you guys to have everything and waste it. I want you all to agree to testify against Sam in his divorce if necessary, although it may not be necessary. The second thing I want you all to do is come home and really look at what you have, and then love and adore your wives and families as you should. Because I do have these tapes, and every time I hear of one of you doing something like this again, I will release the tapes. If your sex life is boring, you need to spice it up some other way. Because if I hear about any new Mandys or other affairs, I'll make you all famous bastards." "But what do you get?" he asked. "What will you gain from this?" "What I always wanted," I smiled. "I just didn't get it with Mandy." I smiled as I left for my second meeting that day. It was very close. I placed the DVD under the head librarian's door and began looking through several books, waiting for a reaction. Mandy had no idea what I had done. She was on the front lines of the library helping patrons. Her boss ran out of his office and shouted, "Mandy E!" just as I was leaving the building. At the same time that Mandy was being fired and threatened with possible legal action, Charlie was being fired and getting his ass kicked all over town. That evening, Cindy and I were relaxing by the fireplace when someone knocked on the door. I opened the door, but left the chain in place, just like the first time Cindy showed up. "What do you need, Mandy?" I asked. "I want to come in so we can talk about it," she said. Cindy stood up from the couch and picked up her glass of wine, heading towards my bedroom. "Let her talk. Let him say whatever he wants," she whispered. "I'll give you half an hour," I said. I pointed to the dining table. I thought Cindy would be easier to hear from there. "Why can't we talk in our bedroom like we always do?" she asked, smiling. "I'm not sure it will be safe," I said. She smiled widely and shook her head. "Yes, you know that if we end up in bed, I will make you forgive me in seconds," she grinned. "That's not the point, Mandy," I said. "What I meant was that my sty test results are not ready yet. Who knows what you might have already conveyed to me." Her smile immediately faded. "You're not going to make this easy for me, are you?" "Just say what you want, Mandy," I said. "Sorry, Tim. I love you. I was doing this long before we got together. I should have stopped, but it was like insurance. You know, in case you leave me. I promise this will never happen again, okay?" she said. "Mandy, I'm sorry too. I loved you too. But I never cheated on you. It was a risk for me too. But I loved you without insurance. You could just as easily break my heart. But I loved you enough to trust you. And anyway, you won't do this anymore, at least not with me, because it's over between us. But at least you have the satisfaction of knowing that you were right, and you're in a better position than me. Now that we've broken up, you can just have sex dates again. All I have to get over my breakup with you are my friends." "You have to forgive me," she cried. "I came here and apologized. None of the guys I know want anything to do with me. I don't know what you did, but none of them are answering my calls, and I was also fired. Someone sent my stupid boss a copy of your post. After she fired me, I called the other 2 libraries in town, and neither of them would hire me. They won't even hire me as an unpaid volunteer. I have nothing left." "You still have your mom and dad and your sister," I said. "To hell with them," she screamed. "My parents are old. They don't understand anything. What about my sister? This bitch does nothing but laugh at me. She spent most of her life just trying to outdo me. Why else did she get good grades in school when I didn't? She then became a cheerleader. I hate that bitch. Mandy, at least tell your parents what really happened between us. Because if they ask me, I will tell them the truth. I don't have to explain anything to them. They will believe what I tell them," she replied. She was still whining when I walked her to the door. "Liar," Cindy laughed from my bedroom. "You received your results 3 days ago. Everything is clean." "Will you come back here now that she's gone?" I asked. "Why don't you come here, Mr. Liar?" she answered. "What else did I lie about?" I asked, entering the bedroom. I looked around the room and saw a naked Cindy lying on my bed. She sat up and looked at me playfully. "You and I are much more than friends," she giggled. "Cindy and I arranged our lives and became the couple I had always dreamed of. Perhaps a month later, an event occurred that brought us even closer. Things moved much faster between us than with Mandy. It seemed that we were truly made for each other. In fact, after we made love for the first time, she moved in with me almost immediately. One evening, after dinner, it seemed the most natural thing to do was answer the door when the bell rang. She opened it, wearing only a t-shirt and shorts. She was even barefoot. After the door opened and she said she would open it, I didn't hear anything else. I went to the door and saw her standing with her hand over her mouth and her parents standing on the threshold. "Why?" asked her father. "Why did you do this to your own sister?" "George, we need to sit down and talk about this," I said calmly. "What is there to talk about?" he asked. "We loved you like a son, and this is how you repay us. You took my daughter, led her by the nose, and then threw her away like trash because of a misunderstanding. Now I understand why you abandoned poor Mandy. I thought you were better than this. I thought you were able to see her as a beautiful woman inside, despite her appearance." He turned to Cindy. "You are no longer our daughter. Anyone who can do this to his own sister doesn't deserve a family." "Okay, Dad," Cindy said. "I agree with that." "George, do you even know why I broke up with Mandy?" I asked. "Now I know," he said, shaking his head. I grabbed his hand and pulled him into my office to show him the video while Cindy tried to talk to her mom. As the video played, George became shocked. "She must have been tricked into this," he shouted. He ran out of the house, dragging his wife with him. "Sorry," I said when they left. What are you apologizing for? Cindy asked. You, your family, and our friends are all I need. Cindy and I got married about a year later. We invited her parents, but they didn't come. When our son was born, they didn't show up either. Almost 5 years later, Cindy and I were relaxing in our yard while our 4-year-old son chased his new puppy through the grass, and we saw them again. Joey ran over to the two-person hammock where my wife and I were relaxing, cuddling. "Who are these people?" he asked, pointing to the gate. "These are your grandparents," Cindy said, standing up and slowly walking towards the fence. "No, they're not," Joey replied. Like most 4-year-olds, he knew everything. "My Nana and Papa are not strangers. These people are strangers." He ran back to play with the dog. He had no further interest in the people who stood and looked at him. "George, how can I help you?" I asked. "Can we come in and talk?" he asked. I nodded and opened the gate. "Your house and yard are so beautiful," Cindy's mom said, looking around. "Where's Cindy?" "Probably inside," I said with a shrug. "Can I look at him? At my grandson?" she asked. I nodded again. She walked over to where Joey was rolling on the ground and the puppy was licking his face. He laughed, trying to push away the puppy's insistent tongue. Suddenly, Cindy ran out of the house and rushed to her mother. "Get away from my child," she screamed. There was so much rage in her voice that it stunned even me. Her mother froze in place. Cindy grabbed the keys to my Mustang and took Joey and the puppy. "I'm taking Joey to his real grandparents," she said, kissed me and walked away, leaving me alone with her parents. "We came to ask you for a favor," George finally said to break the silence. I looked at him. "Mandy is in the hospital," he said. "She wants to talk to you. She wants to talk to both of you." I sighed. "I can't speak for Cindy," I said. "One of the things that makes our marriage successful is that we love each other, but we don't take each other for granted. I can talk to her when she gets back to find out what she wants to do. But for me, it all ended 5 years ago. I don't see any reason to talk to Mandy just because she's sick." "Tim, you were right. I must apologize to you for the words I said then. I can't imagine the pain you were going through then. I think we handled the situation poorly. I'm glad you and Cindy had each other to hold on to. I just didn't want to believe that my Mandy could do something like that." "You were just being a father," I said, "or at least half of my father." "I'm not Mandy's stepfather," he smiled. "I didn't mean stepfather," I said. "I meant my father's half. You had 2 beautiful daughters, but you only paid attention to one of them. Cindy has worked her whole life, hoping you'd notice her. But you never paid attention to her. We are happy. We have a wonderful life, and we love each other. I can't speak for Cindy, but Mandy, sick or not, I don't care." "She's not just sick," he said slowly. "She's dying, Tim." "What?" I burst out. "After you broke up, she couldn't get over it. She started having sex left and right again. We couldn't stop her. We took her to doctors and psychologists. She said she had a hole in her heart that she couldn't fill. She slept with all kinds of men, of every color and nationality. It was disgusting. We even caught it a couple of times at our house. But in the end, it all caught up with her. She started getting sick and was diagnosed with HIV about a year ago. At first, medications and cocktails helped, but a few months ago, she developed AIDS. She doesn't have long to live." "We've talked a lot in recent weeks," he continued. "Her mother and I now know the whole truth. We know how horribly she treated Cindy while they were growing up. Did you know that Mandy has been trying to get all of Cindy's boyfriends away since her first date? Every time Cindy found a guy she liked, Mandy slept with him." "It doesn't matter anymore," Cindy said, standing behind us. "When it became important, I got it," she said. "Where is my grandson?" Cindy's mom asked. "You don't have a grandson," Cindy hissed. "I've been invisible to you my whole damn life so Mandy could live like a spoiled princess. I won't let you ruin my son." "But what about Mandy? She wants to apologize," George said. "It's time for Mandy to realize that there are some things she can't get," Cindy said. "You couldn't teach her that, so I'll have to do it." "But she's your sister," George whined. She's family. Blood is thicker than water. Cindy laughed. She never acted like a sister. We weren't a family. I learned to love from Tim. Love is thicker than blood. Tell Mandy that we accept her apology, but we don't want to see her. Cindy's mom spoke then. Cindy, I know you're angry, honey. You have the right to this. Your father and I. We made mistakes, but we are people. We had 3 beautiful daughters, but your sisters were both special. They needed our attention more. You have always been the strongest. And look at you. You became great, not because of us, but in spite of us. We must put the past behind us and come together as a family. Your children will be the only grandchildren we will have. I want to meet my grandson and any others you may have. Tears rolled down her cheeks and her husband's cheeks. But Cindy had too many years of accumulated resentment to give in so easily, so I spoke up for her. You'll have to give this some time, I said softly. Cindy is truly a very strong woman, but being ignored by her parents for most of her life is hard. It will take her time to get over all this, but she will forgive you in the end. Maybe we could start with dinner. If all goes well, maybe we'll introduce you to Joey and see what happens next. But you will have to be patient. Here her father almost ruined everything. So what about Mandy and the hospital visit? He asked. Perhaps you could bring your son to meet his aunt. Get the hell out of my yard, Cindy screamed, and don't come back. Her father was stunned. Her mother was angry with him. They turned and walked towards the gate, looking back at us every few steps. After her parents left, Cindy smiled at me. What unfortunate people they are, she muttered. But they still did something right, I said. For example, she asked sarcastically. For example, you, I smiled. Where's Joey? At my grandparents', she grinned. We have work to do. I just looked at her. I don't want him to grow up to be a spoiled only child, she said. He needs a sister, maybe even 2. Are you ready? Let's race to the bedroom, I shouted. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.